Hi. What's today? Sunday? Happy Sunday. This is just a slightly unruly piece of hair, so we're just going to pin her back. God, it's hot. It's toasty, but I shouldn't be complaining because it'll be freezing for months. So, Sunday, we are continuing to read the Odyssey by Homer. I'm not super sure how far into it we will get, but let's pick up where we left off, which is book 8, and I am just going to apply a little bit of lip balm. Also, comments have been getting weird. People have been leaving weird comments. So don't do that. Please. Because we're just here to read. That's all we're doing. Okay. Book 8. At the first show of dawn, great Alcinous left his couch, as did that ravager of cities, Odysseus, kinsman of Zeus. The anointed king led him to the formal meeting place of the Phaeacians, where it had been contrived amongst the shipping. There they sat them down side by side on benches of polished stone, while Pallas Athene, in the guise of the king's herald, went up and down the city, furthering her scheme for getting brave Odysseus home. She accosted for a moment everyone she met, saying urgently, "Go across now to the council, all you leaders of the Phaeacians, wise men and warriors, there to make up your minds upon the stranger who has just come in from wandering through the deep and claims the hospitality of our wise Alcinous. He has an air with him, like the deathless ones." By such words she sharpened the zeal and curiosity of everyone, so that in a trice the standing ground and seats were thronged with burgesses. To many of these the look of Laertes' cunning son was wonderful, for Athene had endured his head and shoulders with a benediction of glory, and made his figure tower up in bulk to fill the eye. The goddess would have him win the love of every Phaeacian, and their reverence and awe, and therefore had empowered him to perform miracles of strength when they put him to the test. After all men were assembled in their places, Alcinous lifted up his voice and said, "Hear me, leaders of the Phaeacians, in war and peace, as I utter the bidding of my heart. This stranger, for I know him not, has wandered into my house with no one to vouch for him, not even to say if he is from the peoples of the dawn or of the sunset. He asks a passage and presses that it be assured to him, and I say that according to precedent we should hasten his going. Never, never shall any visitor to my house linger there in distress for want of setting forward. Wherefore, let us pull a black ship down to the sacred sea, a new ship for the maiden voyage, and choose from among the people 52 young oarsmen of proven excellence. And these shall be their present orders. Lash the sweeps firmly into place by the benches, then make haste ashore, every one of you, back to my house, where by my care you shall find a banquet ready for your falling to. Unto the rest, to the sceptred kings, I would say, repair now to my goodly house. There will we kindly entertain the stranger in the great hall. Let no one of you fail this tryst." There's a fruit fly that's flying around and he is irritating. "Nay, further, let someone bid to the gathering our divine minstrel Demodocus, to whom the god has given such gift of music that he charms his hearers with every song to which his heart is moved." The king ceased and led on. The sceptred ones followed him, and a herald sought the godlike musician, whilst the chosen youths, the 50 went down to the brink of the waste of waters. When they were arrived at the sea and the ship, they launched the black hull into the briny deep, stepped the mast, carried her sails aboard, and fixed the sweeps into their rawhide loops all proper. They bent the white sails and moored her, riding high on the swell. Afterward, they took their way to the palace of profound Alcinous, whose courts and galleries and rooms were now all oppressive men, citizens of every age having thronged in. To entertain them, Alcinous devoted 12 sheep, 8 boars with gleaming tusks, and 2 heavy-gated oxen, which they flayed and prepared busily for the heart-warming feast. The herald came to hand, leading the beloved minstrel, whom the muse did especially love, yet had her gifts to him been mixed, both good and evil. She had taken from him the sight of his eyes and given him a power of harmony. Pontonous backed a silver-studded throne against a tall pillar in the midst of the feasters and set it for the musician and put him on it, then hung the resonant lyre on a peg above him and guided his hand to the place so that later he might know to reach down. Beside him he set a food basket and a goodly table and a wine cup ready, that he might drink as his spirit prompted. The company plunged hands into the bounty provided until they had satisfied their lust for drink and meat. Then the muse pricked the musician on to sing of the great deeds of heroes, as they were recounted in verses whose fame had already filled the skies, telling of the feud between Odysseus and Achilles, son of Peleus, and how once, at a splendid feast of the gods, they had accused each other with terrible words. Whereat the king of men, Agamemnon, secretly was glad, gleeful that the best of the Achaeans thus fell out. Because Phoebus Apollo had prophesied it to him that day, Agamemnon crossed the precinct of naked rock at the most holy Pytho to consult his oracle. Those were the beginnings of that tide of sorrow which was to whelm down Trojans and Danaans alike, as Zeus, the Almighty, willed. Of this was the song of the very famous minstrel, but Odysseus, with 2 strong hands, drew the broad purple cloak over his head to hide his goodly face. He was ashamed to let the tears well from his deep-set eyes publicly before the Phaeacians. Each time the divine singer broke off his song, Odysseus dashed away the tears, freed his head from the cloak, and poured from his loving cup a libation to the god. But as soon as the song began again, at the bidding of the Phaeacian chiefs to whom the verses were unalloyed delight, then would Odysseus again hide his head and stifle his sobs. The other company failed to see how his tears ran down. Only Alcinous remarked it, for he sat next to him, and could not but notice and overhear his deep-drawn agony. Wherefore, at an early chance, he broke in upon the o'er-loving Phaeacians. Pay heed, champions and counsellors. We are glutted with feasting together, and with the lyre which is complement of splendid food. Instead, let us sally out and divert ourselves with feats of strength, that when the stranger goes home, he may tell his friends how we surpass others in boxing and wrestling and jumping and foot racing. He spoke and went out. They followed. The herald hung the sounding lyre upon its peg, took Demodocus by the hand, and led him forth from the hall by the way which the other Phaeacian leaders had taken to witness the exercises. An immense company, a concourse of thousands, followed them to the appointed place, and many gallant youths stood up as contestants. Acroneus rose up, and Ocealus, and Elatrius, Nautius, and Primnius, with Anchilaus and Aretmius, Pontius, Prorius, Thun, and Anabisinus, with Amphilaus, son of Paulinus, son of Tecton, also Eurylaus, son of Naubolus, son of Naubolus, the match of deadly Ares, who in face and proportions excelled all the Phaeacians except noble Laodamas. 3 sons of royal Alcinous stood up also, Laodamas, Halius, and godlike Clytonius. Their first trial was of running. The course was laid out straight from its start for speed. The field of them raced across the flat land in a storm of dust. However, noble Clytonius surpassed all in this. When he came back to the crowd, his advantage in lead was as that of a yoke of mules in breaking unbroken ground, so distant were the others behind him. Then they wrestled their hardest, and Eurylaus proved champion of champions. Amphilaus carried off the jumping, and Elatrius easily won the weight throwing, while the boxing fell to Laodamas, Alcinous's doty son. Doty son? Alcinous's doty son? Maybe. When every spirit had been delighted with the sports, then said Laodamas, the son of Alcinous, "Come with me, friends, and let us question the stranger, to learn if he is skilled in games and can show us any feats. He is not in any sense ill-built. Those thighs and calves, bull neck, and vigorous hands are tokens of enormous power. Nor has he lost his prime. It is only that he is broken by excess of hardships. I give you my oath that for wreaking havoc upon a strong man, even the very strongest, there is nothing so dire as the sea." Eurylaus answered him and said, "Laodamas, you have spoken to the point. Go up now, declare yourself, and call him out." Upon which the honest son of Alcinous moved through the crowd and addressed Odysseus. "Will you not, father stranger, now attempt some feat, if you have the skill I credit you? For there is no surer fame in a man's own lifetime than that which he wins with his hands and feet. Also at this juncture you may well purge your heart of care and prove yourself, for soon you will be on your journey. Is not your ship launched and your crew told off?" Wily Odysseus replied, "Laodamas, why do you thus invite me in mockery? The fashion of my heart is more like grief than games. For long I have been a toiling and a suffering man. My very purpose here in your gathering is only as a suppliant before your king and people to crave my passage homeward." Euryalus took him up and sneered in his face. "Truly, stranger, I do not reckon you a man good at games, like the generality of real men, but rather a master of peddling sailors, one who traffics up and down, and a heavy merchantman, mindful always of cargo and husbanding freights, with a sharp eye on gain. You are not built like a champion." Deep Odysseus glared at him and thundered, "You, whoever you are, do not speak well. You behave like a low fellow. So true it is that the gods do not lavish graciousness entire, their whole endowment of beauty and wit and eloquence, upon all men alike. There will be one rather feebler than average in build, and yet the god will so crown what he says with a bloom of beauty that all who look on him are moved. When he holds forth in public, it is with assurance, yet with so honey-sweet a modesty that it makes him shine out above the ruck of men who gaze at him whenever he walks their city as if he were a god. Another will be handsome as the immortals, yet will lack that strand of charm twined into his words. Take yourself, a masterpiece of body in which perhaps not even a god could see amendment, yet not in mind. Your reviling made the heart beat faster in my breast. I am no ninny at sports, as you would have it. Indeed, I think I was among the best in my time, while I yet heard the prompting of my youth and hands. In my time, for here I subsist in pain and misery, having risked and endured much in the wars of men and the wearisome seas. Yet despite the ravages of these evil things, I will essay your tests of strength, for that sneer galled me, and your word has stung me to the quick." Wow, that was tough for me to get through. Let's hope the second half is a little bit better. He spoke and sprang to his feet. All cloaked as he was, he seized a throwing weight, a huge, heavy stone, far bigger than those with which the Phaeacians had been competing. He whirled it up and flung it from his mighty hand, and the stone sang through the air. Down they quailed to the earth, those Phaeacians of the long oars, those master mariners, beneath the hurtling of the stone, which soared so freely from the hero's hand that it overpassed the marks of every other. Athene, in her human shape, appeared suddenly and marked the place where it touched the earth. Loudly she cried to Odysseus, "Stranger, even a blind man's dim groping hand would pick out the dint of your stone, because it does not lie confused among the crowd of marks, but is alone, far in front of all. Be confident for this event at least. No Phaeacian will reach your throw, much less exceed it." So the goddess cried, and great Odysseus was glad at the pleasure of finding in the assembly one stout-hearted friend. Wherefore gaily he challenged the Phaeacians. "Now, my young athletes, match me this in throw, and very soon after you do, I think I will send down another as long or longer. For the rest, let any man whose spirit or temper prompts him come out and take me on in boxing and wrestling or foot racing, as you will. To such a pitch have you wrought me that I shall not flinch from anything, nor refuse any single Phaeacian, except only Laodamas, my host. For who but a shallow-pated fool would strive with his benefactor? To challenge one's host, while being kindly entreated in a foreign land, would be to spite oneself. But for the others, I refuse none and shirk nothing. I shall look all in the face and prove them. In none of the sports which men use do I disgrace myself. I can well handle the polished bow. In the thick of each fight, I would be ever the first to loose arrow and bring down my man, no matter how many followers of mine were there, shooting at the enemy. In the Trojan plain, where the Achaeans made such a trial of shooting, only Philoctetes surpassed me with the bow. Wherefore I avouch myself more adept therein than any other man who now eats earthly food. With the men of old time I do not wish to rate myself, not with Heracles, nor with Eurytus of Ocalia, who would make a shooting match with the immortal gods, of which ambition great Eurytus early died, cut off young from his house, for Apollo slew him in range at being challenged to a bout in archery. I will send my spear further than any man his arrow. I fear only that in swiftness of foot some of the Phaeacians may beat me, for I have been shamefully mauled by incessant waves on a ship destitute of comfort. Therefore are the joints of my knees enfeebled." So he protested, and they all waited in a hush. Only Alcinous answered and said, "See now, stranger, we do not resent these words you have uttered, because you, in anger at such a fellow's facing you in the ring and upbraiding you, have been pleased to make so plain to us your inbred prowess, that no mortal man who knows what words are worth may question it. Yet listen now to what I say, and remember our accomplishment and the skill Zeus has given us from our fathers' times, even until now, that you may tell the tale to some other hero when you sup in your own house with your wife and children. For my part, I confess we are not polished fighters with our fists, nor wrestlers, but we can run swiftly on our feet and are experts on shipboard. We love eating and harp playing and dancing and changes of clothes, and hot baths and our beds. Wherefore, my people, bestir yourselves and cause the best dancers of the Phaeacians to dance before us, so that when the stranger is got home, he may acquaint his friends with our surpassing goodness in seamanship and running and dancing and singing. Let someone go quickly to our house and fetch for Demodocus? Yes. Let someone go quickly to our house and fetch for Demodocus that sounding lyre which he will find hung up somewhere. These words are not easy in the slightest. At the word of Alcinous, his herald ran to find the polished lyre in the palace. Other 9 men stood up, the elect and appointed stewards of the crowd, whose duty was to set the stage. They leveled the dancing ground, making its ring neat and wide. The herald arrived with the minstrel's singing lyre. Demodocus advanced into the clearing space. About him grouped boys in their first blush of life and skillful at dancing, who footed it rhythmically on the prepared floor. Odysseus watched their flying, flashing feet and wondered. Then the lyre player broke into fluent song, telling of the loves of Ares and coiffed Aphrodite in the house of Hephaestus. How they first came together by stealth, and of the many gifts that Ares gave her, until he was able to defile the bed and marriage of Hephaestus the king, and of the eventual coming of Helios, the son to the king, with word of their loving intercourse as he had witnessed it. When Hephaestus had heard the dismal tale, he hastened to his forge, elaborating evil for them in the depths of his breast. He set the great anvil in its stock and wrought chains which could be neither broken nor loosed, that the guilty pair might be gyved in them forever and ever. Out of his bitter rage against Ares was born this device. He went then into his marriage chamber, where stood the bed he had cherished, and about its posts he interlaced his toils. Others, many of them, hung down from aloft, from the main roof tree over the hearth, gossamer chains so fine that no man could see them. Not even a blessed god, with such subtlety of craft, had they been forged. When Hephaestus had meshed all the bed in his snare, he pretended to set forth for Lemnos, the well-built city, which in his eyes is much the dearest land of earth. Nor was it a loose watch that Ares of the golden reins was keeping upon Hephaestus. As soon as he saw the great craftsman leave, he took his journey to the famous house, chafing for love of well-known Cyretha. She was but newly come from Zeus, her mighty father, who had just sat down when Ares was in the house, grasping her hand and saying, "Come, darling, let us to bed and to our pleasure, for Hephaestus is now abroad, visiting in Lemnos among the barbarous-spoken Sintians." His word of their lying together gave her joy. They went to their bed and snuggled deep into it, whereupon the springs of artful Hephaestus closed about them and tightened till they were not able to lift a limb nor move it. At last they understood there was no escape. Then the great god of the mighty arms drew near again and re-entered. He had turned back short of Lemnos when Helios, the spying sun, had given him word. As he made heavily toward his home, grief rooted in his heart. But when he stood there in its entry, savage passion gripped him, so that he roared hideously and declared to all the gods, "Father Zeus and every other blessed immortal, hither to me and see a jest which is unpardonable. Because I am crippled, Aphrodite, daughter of Zeus, does me dishonor, preferring Ares the destroyer, Ares being beautiful and straight of limb where I was born crooked. And whose fault is that, if not my parents? Would they not have brought me into life? Look how these two are clipped together in love's embrace, here in my very bed. To watch them cuts me to the heart. Yet I think they will not wish to lie thus, nor even for a very little while longer, however mad is their lust. Soon they will not wish to be together, yet shall my cunning bonds chain them as they are, until her father has utterly repaid the marriage fee. Every single thing I gave him for this bitch-eyed girl, though indeed his daughter was beautiful, despite her sin." Such heavy words. Such heavy words indeed. Yes. His mouthing gathered the gods to the house of the brazen floor. Poseidon, the earth-girdler, beneficent Hermes, and royal Apollo the far-darting came, but the lady goddesses remained at home, all of them, quite out of countenance. In Hephaestus's forecourt collected the givers of weal, and unquenchable was the laughter that arose from the blessed gods as they studied the tricky device of Hephaestus. One would catch his neighbor's eye and jibe. Bad deeds breed no merit. The slow outrun the speedy. See how poor crawling Hephaestus, despite that limp, has now overtaken Ares, much the most swift of all divine dwellers upon Olympus, and cleverly caught him. Ares will owe him the adulterer's fine. Words like this one whispered to the other. But of Hermes did Zeus's royal son Apollo loudly ask, Hermes, son of Zeus, messenger and giver of good things, would you not choose even the bondage of these tough chains, if you so might sleep in the one bed beside the golden Aphrodite? And to him the god's messenger, Argus-bane, replied, If only this might be, kindly far-darting Apollo. If there were chains without end, thrice as many as are here, and all you gods with all the goddesses to look on, yet I would be happy beside the golden one. At his saying more laughter rose among the immortals. Only Poseidon laughed, not but was... At his saying, more laughter rose among the immortals. Only Poseidon laughed. Not but was still entreating lame Hephaestus, the craftsman, to let Ares go. Now he spoke out with winged words. Loose him, and for him I promise whatever you require, as that he shall discharge the penalty he has incurred before the undying gods. The famous strong-thewed god answered him. Do not thus constrain me, Poseidon, earth-girdler. The bonds of a worthless man are worthless bonds. How could I hold you liable before the immortals if Ares gets away free of all his debt and the snare? And to him the earth-shaker replied, Hephaestus, even if Ares absconds, leaving his debt unpaid, I myself will discharge it to you wholly. And the lame master said, I cannot refuse, nor would it be seemly to refuse such surety. So saying, great Hephaestus loosed the chains, and the couple, when they were freed of the trap and its restraint, swiftly fled away. He to Thrace, and smiling Aphrodite to Cyprus. He to Thrace, and smiling Aphrodite to Cyphus, to Paphos, her sanctuary with its incense burning altar. The punctuation in these is very hard to interpret, which I think is the thing with all of the classics, is something that I'm learning quite a bit as I do this. There, the Graces bathed her and anointed her with ambrosial oil, such as it's set aside for their ever-living gods. There they put upon her glorious clothing, till she was an enchantment to the eye. Such was the song of the famous minstrel. Like the Phaeacians, the long-oared notable mariners, Odysseus had rejoiced in heart as he listened. Then Alcinous ordered Halius and Laodamas to dance by themselves, for never did anyone dare join himself with them. They took it in their hands, the fine ball, purple dyed, which knowing Polybus had made them and played. The first, bending his body right back, would hurl the ball towards the shadowy clouds, while the other in his turn would spring high into the air and catch it gracefully before his feet touched the ground again. Then, after they had made full trial of tossing the ball high, they began passing it back and forth between them, all the while they danced upon the fruitful earth. The other young men stood by the dancing ring and beat time. Loudly their din went up, and great Odysseus turned to Alcinous, saying, O my lord Alcinous, ruler of rulers, did you assure us that your dancers were the best, and now it is proved true. This sight is marvelous. Thereat Alcinous, the sacred king, rejoiced and quickly said to the Phaeacians, I think it's Phaeacians. If it's not, it doesn't really matter. Thereat Alcinous, the sacred king, rejoiced and quickly said to the Phaeacians, Hear me, warlords and statesmen of the Phaeacians. The stranger seems a man of singular understanding. Let us bestow on him the stranger's meed in due form. Here are 12 noble kings who rule among the people, with myself the 13th. Let each generously contribute a fresh robe and a tunic and a talent of precious gold. If all these gifts are brought promptly, the stranger will have them in hand before supper and will go to it gallantly. As for Eurylous, let him alone for his ill manners by words of satisfaction and gift. All accepted his counsel and enjoined it. What are you laughing at? Did you say, hey, cat? This isn't. It's just a little guy. That's what I was laughing at. If you didn't say, hey, cat, then I wasn't laughing at anything. All accepted his counsel and enjoined it. The pursuivants went forth and collected, and bringing the gifts, while Eurylous said, My lord Alcinous, leader of our rank, right truly will I make amends to the stranger as you did. See the short sword of the true metal that I gave to him with its silver hilt and the scabbard of new sawn ivory which contains it. It shall be worth much to him." At the word, he put the silver-mouthed weapon into the hands of Odysseus and spoke wingedly therewith. "Hail, father stranger, if some too harsh word has slipped out, may the storm winds take it and cast it afar. For yourself, the gods grant that you reach your land and see your wife. All too long have you been afflicted and far from the solace of your friends." Readily Odysseus answered him, saying, "To you too, my friend, a warm greeting. May the gods give you happiness, and may you never feel the lack of his sword which you today give me with the balm of healing words." He slung the silver-mounted weapon about his shoulder. The sun went down, and the presentation of the costly gifts began. In state, the heralds bore them to the palace, where the great king's son received them for Odysseus, and bestowed them for safekeeping with their revered mother, while the king himself led in the guests to take places on the lofty thrones. Then did Alcinous call to Arete his wife, "Woman, bring hither a very rich chest, your noblest. Put in it a newly washed robe and tunic. Then warm a copper for the guest by the fire and heat water, that he may bathe himself before he views the show of gifts which the Phaeacian leaders have presented to him. And afterward he will be able to enjoy the feast and our minstrel's music. Stay, to his treasure I will also add this my very beautiful wrought cup of gold, that he may call me to mind always when in his house he pours drink offerings to Zeus and the other gods." So he said, and Arete told her maids to set, as soon as might be, the great three-legged pot by the fire. They placed over the roaring flames the cauldron which served for the bath, and poured water into it, and piled kindling wood beneath. The fire licked round the pot's belly, and the water warmed, while Arete brought out of the bedchamber a fair coffer for the visitor, and put into it the splendid gifts, the clothing and the gold, which the Phaeacians had given. From her own store she added a fine tunic and outer garment, and then addressed him succinctly as follows. "See to the lid now yourself, and quickly contrive a sure fastening about it, lest anyone rob you on your way back, as you are enjoying the sweetness of sleep while your black ship glides on." Odysseus at once fixed the cover to her asking, and secured it with that intricate knot which Dame Circe? I don't know if it's Circe or Cirque, that which Dame Circe had taught him. Then straightway the housewife bade him to go to the bath place and wash. Circe? Maybe it's Circe. It gladdened him to see the steaming water, for it had not been his good fortune to meet such comfort since he left the dwelling of bright-haired Calypso, with whom he had had the entertainment of a god continually. When the maids had washed and anointed him, they draped him in a rich robe and tunic, and he went out of the bath-house to join the men at their wine-drinking. On the way, by the pillar of the massy roof, stood Nausicaa in her god-given beauty, admiring Odysseus with all her eyes, until words came and she addressed him directly. "Farewell, stranger, and when in your native land think of me sometimes, for it is chiefly to me that you owe the gage of your life." Odysseus answered her, saying, "Nausicaa, daughter of high-souled Alcinous, if Zeus, Hera's lord, the Thunderer, wills that I reach home and see the day of my return, there and then will I pay vows to you, as to a divine one, and forever and ever throughout all my days. I give you my life, maiden." He ended and passed to his throne beside King Alcinous. The servers were mixing wine and distributing meats. The herald drew near, leading Demodocus, the sweet singer, whom the people honored, into the midst of the feasters. He set him there with his back to the tall column, and to the herald wily Odysseus called, having cut off from the chine of a white-toothed boar, there was an abundance to spare, a piece rich all round with fat. Not a sentence. "Herald," said he, "take and offer this portion of flesh to Demodocus, that he may eat it with a greeting from me that not even the depth of my misfortunes can chill. For it is right that bards should receive honor and reverence from every man alive, inasmuch as the muse cherishes the whole guild of singers and teaches to one each one his rules of song." Let's just take a little bit of a break. Do I play any games? No, I do not play games. It's just never been something that I've done. Okay. When the hero had made an end of speaking, the herald bore his meat in hand to Demodocus, who received it and rejoiced. All stretched out and helped themselves to the ready cheer, and when they were filled with drink and food, then Odysseus addressed Demodocus. "Demodocus, I laud you above all mortal men. I know if it was not the muse, daughter of Zeus, that taught you, I know not if it was the Muse, daughter of Zeus, that taught you, or Apollo himself. Anyhow, you have sung the real history of the mishaps of the Achaeans, their deeds, their sufferings, their griefs, as if you had been there or had heard it from eyewitnesses. But now change your theme and sing of how Epeius, with the help of Athene, carpened together that great timber horse, the crafty device with which Odysseus got taken into the citadel after packing it with the men who were to lay Troy to waste. Tell me all this in order, and then I will maintain everywhere that the god's grace has conferred the bounty of inspiration on your singing. So he said, and the minstrel, fired by the god, gave proof of his majesty. He took up his tale where the main body of the Argives embarked on their well-decked ships after setting fire to their hutments and sailed away, leaving the remnant, the companions of famous Odysseus, enclosed in the heart of Troy town, in the meeting place, hidden within the horse which the Trojans themselves had dragged up to their citadel. There the horse stood, while the people hung about it, arguing this way and that, uncertainly. They were of 3 minds, either to prise open its wooden womb with their pitiless blades, or to drag it off the cliff's edge and roll it down among the rocks, or to leave it there dedicated as a mighty peace offering to the gods. In the end, this last council had it, for it was fated that they should perish when their city gave lodgment to the monstrous beast in which crouched all the flower of the Argives with their seeds of death and doom for Troy. He sang how the sons of the Argives quitted their hollow den and poured out from the house and made an end of Troy. He sang the share of each warrior in the wasting of the stately town, and how Odysseus, Ares-like, attacked the house of Deiphobus with great Menelaus. There, he said, Odysseus braved terrible odds, but conquered in the end by help of resolute Athene. Thus ran the famous singer's song, but Odysseus melted, and tears from his eyelids bedewed his cheeks. That was probably one of the biggest mess-ups I've had. So it is when a loving wife flings herself, wailing about the body of her man who has fallen before his township and fellow citizens, defending the town and his children from their cruel day of sack and rapine. The sight of him laboring his last breath and dying makes her wail aloud and wind herself about him. Yet do the enemy from behind beat her with their spear shafts across her bowed shoulders and lead her into servitude, to her fate of toil and grief. Just as that woman's cheeks are ravaged with despair, just so piteously did the tears fall from Odysseus's brows. Yet this time, too, his falling tears were missed by all the company, save only Alcinous, who sat by him and marked his grief, unable not to hear the moaning deep within his breast. Alcinous at once spoke to the oar-loving Phaeacians. "Lend me your ears, captains and counselors. It is for Demodocus now to let be his echoing lyre. His song does not delight us all. From supper time, when the divine singer began, the stranger has not ceased from bitter grieving. Some sore pain besets his heart. Wherefore cease, that we may all, hosts and guests, make merry as we fairly ought. For have we not contrived in our guest's honor just what he requires of us, an escort, and further add to him love tokens in proof of our regard? Any sufficient man who has the wit to pierce a little beneath the surface will entertain a stranger or a suppliant as his brother. Wherefore, stranger, do not in crafty purpose conceal the news I seek, and make a virtue of frankness. Tell us by what name they call you there at home, your mother and father and the others in your city and district. For all parents fit names to their children as soon as these are born, so that there is no one so poor or so gentle that he is nameless. Tell me your land and district and city, that our sentient ships may get there. Tell me your land and district and city, so that our sentient ships may get their bearing for your journey. Understand that the Phaeacians do not carry steersmen or steering oars like ordinary ships. Their vessels know what men think and purpose. They know the cities and rich lands of every people, and swiftly cross the ocean gulfs through the thickest veils of rain cloud or mist. Nor are they troubled by panic or disaster ever. Yet did I hear my father Nausithous once say that Poseidon was vexed with us for giving safe conduct impartially to all mankind, and would one day shatter a trim Phaeacian ship homeward bound across the misty sea from such ascending, and would shroud our city under a high mountain on every side. So the old man said, the god may do it or may forbear. It shall be as he wills. But open your heart now and inform me plainly whither you wandered, and what coasts of men you have visited. What were the peopled cities like, and what the peoples? whether harsh, savage, and unjust, or humane men, hospitable and God-fearing. Tell us why you wept so bitterly and secretly when you heard of the Argive Danans and the fall of Ilion. That was wrought by the gods, who measured their life's thread for those men, that their fate might become a poem sung to generations yet to be. Did some kinsman of your wife's die before Ilion, some of those worthy relatives by marriage who become nearest to us after our own flesh and blood? Or perhaps it was a friend, some man loving and true. Friends with understanding hearts become no less dear to us than brothers. Let's see. Okay, we'll just do book 9 because I am struggling today, but I want to get through this. Many-sided Odysseus then began, Lord Alcinous, most eminent, we are in very deed privileged to have within our hearing a singer whose voice is so divinely pure. I tell you, to my mind, the acme of intelligent delight is reached when a company sits feasting in some hall, by tables garnished with bread and meat, the while a musician charms their ears, and a cupbearer draws them wine, and carries it round, served ready for their drinking. Surely this, as I say, is the best thing in the world. Yet lo, at such a moment your heart prompts you to seek the tale of my dismal fortunes, whose telling will wring from me yet deeper tears. How shall I rank my sorrows, to put this first, that afterwards? The gods of heaven have given me such excesses of woe. I will begin with my name to make you sure of me, that when this cruel spell is past, I may become your host in my house, my very distant house, alas. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, a name which among men spells every resource and subtlety of mind, and my fame reaches heaven. I live in pellucid Ithaca, the island of Mount Neraton, whose upstanding slopes are all aquiver with the wind-blown leaves. About it lie many other islands very near to one another, Dulichium and Same and wooed Zacynthus. My island stands deep in the sea and nearer the west than its neighbors, which rather face the dawning and the sun. It is a harsh land, yet it breeds good youths, but perhaps in every man's sight there is nothing better than his native land. Take my case. Calypso, the fair goddess, sought to keep me in her hollow cave, and would have used me as her husband. And likewise, Circe, the wily lady of Aea, tried to detain me in her house, she too wanting me for a husband. But neither the one nor the other could pervert the heart in my manly breast. Wherefore I say that no matter how rich a man's circumstances may be abroad, among foreign parts, there is no sweet in life compared with home and parents. However, let me hark back to the tale of the calamitous homeward journey with which Zeus has afflicted my return from Troy. Hi. From Ilion the winds served me to near Ismarchus of the Sycones? Ismarus of the Sycones. I sacked the city and slew them. Their wives and wealth we took and divided precisely, so that no one of us, though me, should go short of his just share. I suggested then that we all flee hot-foot, but my utter fools of men would not obey. There was much wine for the drinking, yet, and mutton or beef from the great droves of sheep, and heavy screw-horned kine that they would have butchered by the shore. I'm going to adjust, because that is not comfortable anymore. That they would have butchered from the shore. Whilst they so dallied, our Sycones cried for help to the island Sycones, their neighbors, but more numerous and better men of their hands. Men who fight mounted, but also, when need was, on foot with footmen. They were upon us, thick as the leaves and buds of springtide, and the first show of morning, while over us there hung a foreboding of disaster, by doom of Zeus, who had further pains in store for our ill-fated heads. The troops set themselves to battle by the swift ships and rained thickly at one another with their copper-bladed spears. So long as the dawn lasted, and while the blessed day increased, just for so long we stood firm and repulsed their swarms. But when the sun had crossed his stage and brought near the hour for loosing plough oxen homeward in the evening, then finally the Sycones caused the Achaean lines to waver and give way. Is this the book Nolan making his movie Odyssey? Oh yeah, for sure. I kind of forgot he was making a movie about the Odyssey. That'll be good. 6 warriors perished out of each ship's complement. We others, who for that time fled our death and doom, sailed from the spot with mixed feelings, rejoiced to have avoided fate, yet mourning our comrades, for whose sake not one of those full-bellied ships of mine stood thence till we had thrice invoked the name of each unhappy victim of the cyclone's violent hands on the flats there by the shore. Next Zeus, the cloud marshal, incited against our fleet a north wind with screaming squalls. He blinded land and sea alike with clouds. Night plunged down from heaven. The ships were swept aside before the blast, and their sails shredded into tatters by the gale. We had to strike them in instant fear of death, and to take the oars. Vehemently we tugged our ships shoreward. For 2 days and 2 nights we lay there, making no way and eating our hearts out with despair at the unceasing labor. But on the 3rd morning, bright-haired dawn achieved clear daylight. Wherefore up went our masts and white shining sails, enabling us to sit there at our ease, watching how the winds and the steersman held us to our course. Indeed, that time I nearly came unscathed to my fatherland, only for the swell in the sea currents and a north wind which united against me as I beat round Cape Malea and deflected me wide of Cythera. Thereafter, for 9 days, I was driven by ravening winds across the sea. On the 10th day, we made the land of the lotus eaters, men who browse on a food of flowers. We landed there to fill our water butts, while my crews snatched a meal on the shore beside their likely vessels. As soon as the first hunger for food and drink had passed, I chose out 2 fellows and added to them a 3rd, as runner, that they might go inland to spy out and inquire what were the human beings there existing. Off they went at once and met a party of those lotus eaters who had no notion of slaying my emissaries. Instead, they gave them a dish of their lotus flowers. And so it was that as each tasted of this honey-sweet plant, the wish to bring news or return grew faint in him. Rather, he preferred to dwell forever with the lotus-eating men, feeding upon lotus and letting fade from his mind all memory of home. I had to seek them and drag them back on board. They wept, yet into the ships we brought them perforce and chained them beneath the thwarts, deep in the well, while I constrained the rest of my adherents to hurry aboard, lest perhaps more of them might eat lotus and lose their longing for home. They embarked promptly and sat to the rowing benches. Then, in the proper ranks all together, they swung their oars and beat the sea hoary white. Hi. We left in low spirits and later came to the land of the arrogant, iniquitous Cyclopses, whose soul leave all things to the gods, that they neither plant nor till. Yet does plenty spring up unsown and unplowed, of corn and barley, and even vines with heavy clusters, which the rains of Zeus fatten for them. They have no government, nor councils, nor courts of justice, but live in caves on mountain tops, each ruling his wives and children, and a law unto himself regardless. Across the bight of the Cyclops' country extends a fertile island, a wooded island, not very far, yet not close. In it there harbored uncounted wild goats. No trace of man scares these, nor do hunters with dogs track them out, fighting their way through the bush to explore the summits of the hills. The herbage is not grazed down by flocks of sheep nor broken by any plough. Rather, the spot continues in solitude, wholly uncultivated, a paradise for the bleating she-goats, by reason that the Cyclopses have no ruddle-cheeked ships, nor shipwrights to make them such seaworthy vessels for pleasuring among the cities of mankind, like those ordinary men who tempt the seas to know others and to be known. Otherwise, they might have made this island theirs, it not being at all bad land. Anything would grow there well in season, and in the soft, moist meadows behind the dikes of the silvery sea, and its vine stalks would bear forever. The crop to be harvested at the due time from such smooth plough loam would be heavy, seeing that the undersoil is fat. Its haven is a natural port requiring no such gear as anchors or warps. Ships can be beached directly, to lie there in peace while the sailors screw up their hearts to venture further or until the winds blow kind. And at the head of this inlet is pure running water from a spring rising in a cave. Black poplars shadow it. Thither we sailed, some god assuredly guiding us, for the night was utterly dark without glimmer. The ground fog shrouded our boats, nor could any moonbeam from the sky pierce the low-lying clouds. Wherefore no one of us saw anything of the island, or of the long slow waves rolling unbroken upon its shelving beach. All we knew was that our good ships gently grounded. As they touched, we struck sail and climbed out, and there, just beyond the water's edge, sunken in a depth of sleep, We waited the goddess of dawn. When she came, rosy-fingered, we began in amazement to compass the island, exploring it, and the nymph daughters of Zeus himself flushed for us the wild goats of the hills to give my men whereon to dine. We ran to seek our carved bows and long-tanged throwing spears from the ships and began shooting, after forming ourselves into 3 bands. Very quickly did the god provide us game to our heart's content. So great was the bag that 9 goats could be shared out to each of the 12 ships that made up my command. For my own ship, as a special allowance, 10 were allotted. Afterwards, throughout the long-lived day and until the sun went down, we sat about feasting, for the meat was unlimited and the drink was good, the red wine being not yet altogether exhausted within our ships, since we had carried off a great store in jars from the hallowed little capital of the Cyclones when we sacked it. While we ate, we stared across the land of the Cyclopses, I think that's just Cyclops. Yeah. While we ate, we stared across the land of the Cyclops, so near that we could see its smoke going up and hear the sounds of its men and the bleating of their sheep and goats, until at last the sun sank and dusk drew down, causing us to stretch out in slumber where we were on the margin of the sea. At dawn I met my men in council and delivered myself as follows. You, my trusty ones, will remain here while I, with my ship and my crew, run over to try those men and find out if they are brutal savages or kindly to guests, reverent and just. After giving these orders, I went up into my ship and told her crew to get aboard when they had let go the hawsers. I don't know what that means. They obeyed at once and managed the rowing benches smartly. The sea turned pale beneath the flailing of their oars. As we came to the nearest point of land, we could see a cave at its seaward extremity, a lofty cave, embowered in laurels. There were signs that large flocks of sheep and goats were wont to be penned within it for the night. Round the cave mouth, a strong-walled yard had been contrived of rocks deeply embedded, with a fence of logs from tall pines and spreading oaks. Actually, it was the lair of a giant, a monstrous creature who pastured his flocks widely from that center and avoided traffic with any man. He was a solitary infidel thing, this ogre, and fearfully made, not in the fashion of a bread-eating man, but altogether singular and outstanding, like a tree-grown crag of the high mountains. I'm, overheating right now. It's a hot one today. I ordered my faithful crew to stand by the ship and guard the ship, while I picked the 12 men I judged best to set off with them. I took as an afterthought a goat skin of potent wine, very mellow, which I had been given by Marin, son of Euanthes, the priest of Apollo tutelary, god of Ismarus. Marin lived in his dense grove, sacred to Phoebus Apollo, and when we sacked the town, we had piously spared him and his wife and child. In reward, he paid me invaluable gifts, 7 talents of refined gold and a mixing bowl of pure silver, over and above this great wine which he drew off neat for us into 12 wine jars. Liquor for gods it was. Only himself and his wife and the housekeeper knew of its existence. He had told none of his women slaves or housemaidens, and when he broached it, he would draw off just the 1 cup of deep delight and pour it into 20 measures of water, whereupon there would waft abroad from the bowl a smell so sweet that it was heavenly, and to hold back from drinking then would indeed have been no joy. A great skin I filled with this drink and took with me, also corn and a leather wallet, for at this very moment some masterful instinct warned me that we might have to do with a strange fierce being of vast strength, knowing neither right nor wrong, and ungovernable. Soon we were within the cave, to find its owner absent, grazing his goodly flocks in their pastures. So we explored the cave, staring round-eyed at cheese racks loaded with cheeses, and crowded pens of lambs and kids, each sort properly apart, the spring younglings in this, mid-yearlings there, and the last-born to the one side. There were pails, buckets, and tubs all brimming with whey. Well-made vessels, too, these milk vessels of his. My men's first petition was that they might lay hold of the cheeses and make off with them, to return at a run and drive kids and lambs from the pens to the ship, in which we should put them hastily into the sea. This advice and the issue would have profited us, but now I would not heed it, so set was I on seeing the master and getting, if he would give it, the guest's present from him. Yet he was coming to prove disastrous to my party. We built up a fire, made a burnt offering, helped ourselves to cheese, and ate as we sat there inside the cavern waiting for our man to come home from the pastures. He brought with him an immense burden of dried wood, kindling for a supper fire, and flung it upon the cave's floor with a crash that sent us scurrying in terror to its far corners. Then he drove under the arch his splendid flock, or rather, those of them that were in milk. The rest, rams and he-goats, he left in the broad yard before the entry. Next he lifted into place and fixed in the cave's mouth a huge tall slab of stone, gigantic like himself. 22 stout four-wheeled wagons would not have shifted it along the ground, so huge was it, this rock that he used to block the door. Then he sat down to milk his ewes and bleating goats, all orderly, later putting her young lamb or kid beneath each mother animal. One half of this white milk he curdled and put to press in the wicker cheese baskets. The other half he left standing in the buckets as provision against his supper time, when he would drink it and satisfy himself. So far he had been wholly engaged in work, but now he rebuilt the fire and looked around and saw us. "Why, strangers," said he, "who are you, and where have you come from across the water? Are you traders? Or pirates, those venturers who sea prowl at hazard, robbing all comers for a livelihood?" Oh, my chin is itchy. So he asked, and our confidence cracked at the giant's dread booming voice and his hugeness. Yet I made shift to speak out firmly, saying, "We are waifs of the Achaeans from Troy, intending homeward, but driven off our course haphazard across the boundless ocean gulfs by adverse winds from heaven. It may be by the will and decree of Zeus. We can vaunt ourselves companions of Atrides, Agamemnon's men, whose is now the widest fame under heaven for having sacked earth's greatest city and brought such multitudes to death. Here, therefore, we find ourselves suppliant at your knees, in hopes of the guesting fee or other rich gift such as is the meed of strangers. Have regard for the gods, magnificent. We are your suppliants. And Zeus, who fares with deserving strangers along their road, is the champion of suppliants, their protector and patron god." Thus far I got, but the reply came from the pitiless heart. "Sir stranger, you are either simple or very outlandish if you bid me fear the gods and avoid crossing them. We are the Cyclops, and being so much the bigger, we listen not at all to Aegeus-bearing Zeus or any blessed god. So, if I should spare your life and your friends, it would not be to shun the wrath of Zeus, but because my heart counseled me mercy. Now tell me where you moored the stout ship when you came. On the far shore was it, or the near? I want to know." With these words he laid a crafty snare for me, but to my subtlety all his deceits were plain. So I spoke back, meeting fraud with fraud. "My ship was broken by Poseidon the earth-shaker, who swept her towards the cape at the very end of your land, and cast her high against the reefs. The wind drifted us in from the high sea. Only myself and these few escaped," so I said. His savagery disdained me one word in reply. He leapt to his feet, lunged with his hands among my fellows, snatched up 2 of them like whelps, and rapped their heads against the ground. The brains burst out from their skulls and were spattered over the cave's floor, while he broke them up, limb from limb, and supped off them to the last shred, eating ravenously like a mountain lion everything, bowels and flesh and bones, even to the marrow in the bones. We wept and raised our hands to Zeus in horror at this crime committed before our eyes, yet there was nothing we could do. Wherefore the Cyclops, unhindered, filled his great gut with the human flesh and washed it down with raw milk. Afterwards he stretched himself out across the cavern among the flocks and slept. I was wondering in my bold heart whether I should now steal in, snatch the keen sword hanging on my hip, and stab him in the body, after making sure with my fingers where was that vital place in the midriff, below the heart and above the liver. Yet my second thoughts put me off the stroke, for by it I should finally seal our own doom. Not enough strength lay in our hands to roll back the huge rock with which he had closed the cave. So we sighed there night long with misery, awaiting dawn, upon whose shining the giant awoke, relit his fire, milked his flock in due order, and put each youngling under its dam. I don't know what a yowling is. After his busy work was done, he seized 2 more of us, who furnished his day meal. Then he drove back sleek beasts out of the cave, easily pulling aside the great door block and putting it back, as one of us might snap its lid upon a quiver. With loud halloos to the flock, the Cyclops led them up into the hills, leaving me imprisoned there to plot evil against him in the depths of my mind, wherein I sought means to pay him back, would but Athene grant me the opportunity for which I prayed. Of what came to me, this seemed best. There laid in the sheep pens a great cudgel belonging to Cyclops, or rather, a limb of green olive wood from which he meant to make himself a staff when it had seasoned. In our estimation, we likened it to the mast of a 20-oared black ship, some broad-beamed merchantman of the high seas. It looked so long and thick. I straddled it and cut off about a fathom's length, which I which I took to my fellows, bidding them taper it down. They made it quite even, while I lent a hand to sharpen its tip. Then I took it and revolved it in the blazing fire until the point was charred to hardness. Thereafter, we hid it under the sheep droppings, which were largely heaped up throughout the cave. Lastly, I made the others draw lots to see who would have the desperate task of helping me lift up our Spike and grind it into his eye when heavy sleep had downed him. The luck of the draw gave me just the 4 men I would have chosen with my eyes open. I appointed myself the 5th of the party. Cyclops came back at evening, shepherding his fleecy flocks, and straightway drove them into the wide vaulted cave, the whole fat mass of them, leaving no single one in the outer yard. Something on his mind, was it, or did some god move him? Then he lifted up the great door-stone and propped it into place before he again sat down to his milking, dealing in turn with every ewe and noisy milch-goat, and later setting their young beneath them. Briskly he attacked his household work, only after it to snatch up 2 more of us and dine off them. Then I went up to the giant with an ivy cup of my dark wine in hand and invited him, saying, "Cyclops, come now, and on top of your meal of man's flesh, try this wine to see how tasty a drink was hidden in our ship. I brought it for you, hoping you would have compassion on me and help me homeward, but your unwisdom is far beyond all comprehending. O sinful one, how dare you expect any other man from the great world to visit you after you have behaved towards us so unconscionably?" I spoke. He took and drank. A savage gladness woke in him at the sweetness of the liquor, and he demanded a 2nd cup, saying, "Give me another hearty helping, and then quickly tell me your name, for me to confer on you a guest gift that will warm your heart. It is true, our rich soil grows good vines for us Cyclops, and the moisture of heaven multiplies their yield, but this vintage is a drop of the real nectar and ambrosia." Thus he declared, and at once I poured him a 2nd cup of the glowing wine, then 1 more, for in his folly he tossed off 3 bowls of it. The fumes were going to his cyclopean wits as I began to play with him in honeyed phrase. "Cyclops, you ask me for my public name. I will confess it to you aloud, and do you then give me my guest gift, as you have promised? My name is No Man, so they have always called me, my mother and father and all my friends." I spoke, and he answered from his cruel heart, "I will eat No Man finally, after all his friends. The others first, that shall be your benefit." He sprawled full length, belly up on the ground, lolling his fat neck aside, and sleep that conquers all men conquered him. Heavily, he vomited out his load of drink, and gobbets of human flesh swimming in wine spurted gurgling from his throat. Gross. Forthwith I thrust our Spike into the deep embers of the fire to get it burning hot, and cheered my fellows with brave words lest any of them hang back through fear. Soon the stake of olive wood, despite its greenness, was almost trembling into flame with a terrible glowing incandescence. I snatched it from the fire, my men helping. Some power from on high breathed into us all a mad courage, by whose strength they charged with the great spear and stabbed its sharp point right into his eye. I flung my weight upon it from above so that it bored home. As a shipbuilder's bit drills into timbers, steadily twirling by reason of the drag from the hide throng which his mates underneath pull to and fro alternatively, so we held the burning pointed stake in his eye and spun it, till the boiling blood bubbled about its pillar of fire. Eyebrows, with eyelids shriveled and stank in the blast of his consuming eyeball, yea, the very roots of the eye crackled into flame. Just as a smith plunges into cold water some great axe head or adze, and it hisses angrily, for that is the treatment, and the strength of iron lies in its temper, just so his eye sizzled about the olive spike. He let out a wild howl, which rang round the cavern's walls and drove us hither and thither in terror. He wrenched the spike of wood from his eye, and it came out clotted and thick with blood. The maddening pain made him fling it from his hands, and then he began to bellow to the other Cyclopses living about him in their dens among the windy hills. They had heard his screaming, and now drew towards the closed cave, calling to know his trouble. "What ails you so, Polyphemus, that you roar across the heavenly night and keep us from sleep? Do not pretend that any mortal is driving your flocks from you by force, or is killing you by sheer might and trickery." Big Polyphemus yelled back at them from within his cave, "My friends, no man is killing me by sleight. There is no force about it." Wherefore they retorted cuttingly, "If you are alone and no one assaults you, but your pain is some unavoidable malady from Zeus, why then, make appeal to your father, King Poseidon." They turned away, and my dear heart laughed because the excellent cunning trick of that false name had completely taken them in. Cyclops was groaning in his extremity of torment. He groped with his hands until he had found and taken the stone from the entrance. Then he sat himself in the cave's mouth, with his fingers extended across it to catch anyone who tried and steal through with the sheep. In his heart he judged me such a fool as that, while I was thinking my very hardest to contrive a way out for myself and my fellows from destruction, we being truly in the jaws of death. Many notions and devices I conceived thus for dear life, and the best of them seemed finally as follows. Some rams there were of big stock, fleecy, great splendid beasts with wool almost purple in its depth of color. I took them by threes silently and bound them abreast with the pliant bark strips from which the wicked monster's bed was plated. The middle beast could then take a man, and the one on either side protect him from discovery. This meant 3 rams for each shipmate, while for myself there remained the prize ram of the flock. I took hold of him, tucked myself under its shaggy belly, and hung there so, with steadfast courage, clinging face upward with my hands twisted into its enormous fleece. Thus we waited in great trepidation for the dawn. At its first redness, the rams rushed out towards their pasture, but the ewes hung about their pens unmilked, bleating distressfully with bursting udders. The Lord, distraught with his terrible pains, felt the back of each sheep as it stood up to march straight past him. The dullards suspected not that there were men bound beneath their fleecy ribs. Last of all, the prime ram came to go out, walking stiffly with the weight of his wool, and me, the deep plodder. Strong Polyphemus stroked him and said, "Beloved ram, why are you the last of all my flock to quit the cave? Never before have you let yourself lag behind the others, but have been always the first to stride freely across the sward, nibbling its smooth buds, and first into the hill streams to drink, while at evening, which was homing time, you would be ever the first that wanted to turn back. And now you come last. Are you feeling the loss of your lord's sight, blinded by that villain with his knavish crew after he had made me helpless with wine? That no man, who I swear has not yet got away from death. If only you could feel me and had the gift of speech to tell me where he skulks from my wrath. How I would dash his brains out against the ground and spill them over the cave to lighten my heart of the pains which this worthless no man has inflicted." He pushed the ram gently from him through the doorway. When we were a little space from the cave and its surrounding yard, I loosed myself and then set free my men. Often turning head to look back, we drove the leggy flock, the fat ripe beasts, down the ship, where the sight of us gladdened the others at the thought of death we had escaped. They would have stayed to lament the fallen, but I would not have it. Sternly I bent my brows and checked each man's weeping, and set them instead by sharp gestures to the tumbling, glossy, fleeced animals into the ship and launching out for the open sea. At once they were aboard and on their benches. Smartly they sat and gave way, so that the sea paled beneath their oar strokes, and when we were just as far from the land as a man's shout might carry, then I hailed the Cyclops in malignant derision. "So, Cyclops, you were unlucky and did not quite have the strength to eat all the followers of this puny man within your cave? Instead, the luck returned your wickedness upon yourself in fit punishment for the impiety that had dared eat the guests in your house. Zeus has repaid you, the other gods agreeing." My cry stung his heart more terribly yet. He tore the crest from a great mountain and flung it at the black-prowed ship, but overcast by a hair's breadth. The rock nearly scraped the end of the tiller. The sea heaped up above its plunging, and the black thrust, like a tidal wave from the deep, washed us landward again very swiftly, almost to shore. I snatched a long pole and used it as a quant, while I signed with my head to the crew how they must lay to it over the oar looms if we were to avoid disaster. They put their backs into it and rowed till we were twice our former distance from the coast. Then I would have taunted Cyclops one more, but my followers, each in his vein, sought with gentle words to restrain me, protesting, "Hothead, why further provoke this savage creature, who with his last deadly shot so nearly brought our ships to shore that we did already judge ourselves dead? Had he caught but a whisper or sound from us just now, he would have crushed our heads and our ship's timbers flat beneath some jagged stone, the marvelous thrower that he is." Thus ran their plea, but my pride was not to be dissuaded. Wherefore once again I spilled my heart's malice over him. "Cyclops, if any human being asks of you how your eye was so hideously put out, say that Odysseus, despoiler of cities, did it, even the son of Laertes, whose home is in Ithaca." Thus I shouted, and his answer came back in a pitiful voice. "O miserable day, which sees the ancient oracle come true! We have a good and a great prophet living with us, Telemus, the son of Eurymus, best of soothsayers, who passed all his life amongst us Cyclopses, practicing that art. He told me it should so come to pass after many days, and I lose my sight by the hand of one Odysseus. Wherefore ever I watched for some tall man, bristling with might, to move impressively upon me, and instead there comes this poor mean pygmy and steals my eye after fuddling my wits with his drink. See here, my Odysseus, come back to me and take my guest bounty together with a Godspeed I will win you from the great Earthshaker. For Poseidon avows himself my father, and so I dare call myself his son. He, if he be kind, will heal my hurt, which no other of the blessed gods nor any man can do. Heal your sight, I cried back at him. Never, not even the Earthshaker will do it. Would God I had power to strip you of life and soul and send you down to Hades, so surely as I know of that. So far, but he lifted up his hands to the starry firmament and prayed to his lord Poseidon. Hear me, dark-haired girdler of the earth, if indeed I am yours and you my sire. Grant that there be no homecoming for this Odysseus, son of Laertes of Ithaca. Yet if it is fated that he must see his friends once more in his stately house in fatherland, let it be late and miserably, in a strange ship, after losing all his crews, and let him find trouble there in his house. So he made his petition, and the dark god heard him. Then the giant bent to another stone, much larger than before, whirled it with immeasurable force, and let it fly. It too fell very near, but this time a little short of the ship, just failing to shatter the rudder. The sea swelled over the bulk of the falling stone, and a wave boiled up and swept us right across to the far side, to the island where all my other well-decked ships with their crews sorrowing nearby for that we had failed them so long. We ran our keel hard up on the sand and came ashore, driving the sheep of the Cyclops. These we shared out, I being very exact to see that no one lacked his part in the division. My warrior company decreed the prize ram to me as gage of honor, and I devoted him to cloud-wrapped Zeus, son of Cronos and universal king, to whom I consumed the choice parts of the thighs with fire. Yet did Zeus not care for my offering, but was inventing ways to destroy all my trim ships and staunch company. However, the sun went down upon us while we sat there, filling ourselves with flesh in incredible abundance and with sweet wine. After the sun had gone and the shadow fallen, we lay down by the water's brink till dawn's rosy showing, when I roused the force and bade them embark and cast off. Soon they were abroad and ready on their thwarts, sitting to the oars and frothing the sea with their well-timed strokes. Our voyage being sad, insomuch as we had lost a part of our fellowship, and glad that we had delivered our own souls from death. That is where we are going to end today. So, thank you for reading with me. I will upload this on YouTube, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye.